All right, welcome back. We are Game 2014 in the fall 2020 semester at George Brown, and it's week 9, part 3 of our broadcast. We just finished talking about some game design fundamentals for mobile and even for desktop. And now we're going to get into the next part, which is all around Unity. So I have a starter for you guys, like I mentioned, and it's up on Blackboard. The Blackboard actually points to GitHub. So if you go to github.com / George Brown College, then you'll see that it's Lab 6, not Lab 6A, Lab 6. Lab 6A is what I did with the last group. But we start with this one. Okay, so let's, I already have that downloaded to make it easier. Hopefully you guys have done that too, so that way you don't have to wait. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here and go into Lab 6B and start this off. All right, so what I've done is, like I said earlier, I've put together a group of assets for you to help. I'm going to put away, I haven't deleted the last project. I put it there. We can use it as reference. There might be some things that still apply. So, but for now, notice I'm starting off with something that looks like this. It's a platformer scene is empty. There's only a platformer main camera. Let's do a couple things. So whenever we have an older project, what I always like to do is I go into the animation folder as an example. Right now we have animations for the enemy, the player, and the pulsing bullet, but that's from our previous project. I'm going to right click here and go create new folder, and I'm going to call this the shooter project, right? So that's the shooter project. So I'm going to drag all those in there so we don't have to be bothered by it. I also have in our external assets a few things. There is this joystick pack that I'll be using today, as well as something called Sunnyland, which is kind of an asset pack. And there's also something called 2D RPK. The 2D RPK is basically just a terrain pack. Okay, so if I wanted to make platforming assets, grounds, different kinds of textures. So I've kind of included this for us so we can use. I've also included standard assets. So standard assets is pretty big. So cross-platform input, there's camera stuff, there's environment things. We might need to use some of this stuff as we go forward, and I didn't want to just install things as we go. So which makes our package now much bigger, probably in the 150 meg range. That's why it's up on GitHub and not on Blackboard. Again, a lot of this is for demo purposes only, so that's why I'm using it this way. All right, so what I want to start with is I want to start off with the environment. But one thing to note is I've modified my LD player so it works a little bit differently. I want to talk about this a bit. So LD player right now, if I go to my settings, notice that I'm using a customized resolution that matches the resolution that's here inside of Unity. So it shows 3040 by 1440. This is important. If my resolution here was something else, like 1080 by 1920, then what I'm going to see here and what I'm going to see here are two different things. They have to match if I'm going to try and simulate what I'm seeing here in Unity. Okay, so that's kind of number one. Please do that. Please make sure that if you can't customize your your environment, then make sure that they match somehow. Whether you use the right phone that you're using in real life, or make sure that the LD player matches. By the way, I highly recommend LD player over Genymotion for now, only because it's easier for us to set up, like I mentioned last time. Next, what I want to do is I want to set up a grid. So I want to right click here and I want to go 2D object and I want to look at tile map. So please do this with me. You guys have done tile maps with JOS, if I'm not wrong. So this is what this tile map will do. I just clicked on this to get there. I just call it tile map. Tile maps aren't good really on their own. What we need to do is we have to set up a tile palette, right? So I'm going to go into Window, 2D, and then go to tile palette. Okay, that's the next step. So first I set up a tile map in the grid, and then I'm into tile palette. Okay, please do this with me. Tile palette, I'm going to make a brand new one. So it's going to be, we're going to call this tile palette 1. You can also name it something that makes sense for you. I'm going to keep all the defaults and click create. It's going to take me to a directory, someplace that I want to put stuff. I want to put it inside of assets, and I want to make a new folder called tile map. And I want to put it in there. Okay, so that's going to make our new palette. What it looks like is a prefab. What I also want in here is I want to have assets. Now inside of your external assets folder, inside of your Sunnyland folder, inside of your artwork folder, in your environment folder, if you click on it, then you're going to see a tile set sliced. I want to use this one. If I pull it over now like this, right, it's going to work. It's going to ask me where I want to put this stuff. Well, I want to put it in the same folder I put my tile map. So I'm going to go, assets, tile map, and then select folder. And it's going to create a tile set that I can use, that I can paint with. It's going to take a second to import stuff. However, there's a problem. And the problem you should have already run into before is when I want to draw these assets in my screen. So let's suppose I want to make some platforms. I want to select one of these blocks and I want to start painting a platform somewhere here. And I'm like going to get something like this. The reason why this is happening is because the texture that has been imported in here it's the pixels per let me go back to the texture for a second. The pixels per unit is set to 100, and what we need to do is, by default, this is a 16 by 16 grid. I'm going to make it so that the pixels per unit is 16. So just change this to the number to 16 and then press apply. When you do that, you're going to notice these get bigger, but now these ones match the background. Are you with me? So again, all I did was I took some of these things, and by the way, you can vary some of them to make them look a little bit more interesting, so they don't always look like the same one. You know, as an example, there's a kind of a platform that we put together, and I'm not going to put the platform together so that it is very, very interesting at this point. All I'm looking for is some kind of continuity, so that way we see a platform has a shape undo, and part of it's going to be off screen, part of it's going to be on screen, and it's going to be fairly big enough so that our character starting can run around and not be afraid to fall off. So, right, as you can see, all I'm doing is something that you should already know what to do. This is something that you and Joss have probably been able to do together, if I'm not wrong. All right, I'm going to make another one of these. So a couple things to do. I'm just going to do the same thing, except I'm going to make it a little bit taller up. So kind of like a couple of steps up here, maybe this high. And just going to draw it randomly. Again, do one of these. Make it so that's at least this high here, and this high here, and draw the middle. Am I drag and dropping them? Yeah. So what all I'm doing is painting them. That's all I'm doing. I'm not being discriminatory here. I'm just painting them down, right? So you should be able to do the same thing with yours. And the way I did that was I created a palette, and the palette itself allows me to do it. Okay. All right, so there's a couple of tiles as an example, and we can add more. We can make so that there's ramps. We can do a bunch of stuff. But for now, let's just leave these two in there just for testing purposes. You can see how they appear on the screen. And what I want to do is close this off for now. So these are these two things. We want to add a background. There's a background asset back here in the back. If I place it in the scene, notice it becomes kind of in the front. Why? Because my tile map has an order and layer by default, the entire tile map of 0. Let's make this 1. which makes it so that my background stays in the back with a border and layer of 0, right? Let's expand this background so it's at least 8 times larger. And now we have a background. Sunnyland. Now this background is a little bit too bright for what we want to do for testing. So I'm going to turn it off. It's here, but I'm going to turn it off. And when we need to, we'll put it back on so we can see what this looks like. But what I want to do is I want to push this across to the phone to see if it works. It looks okay. This is the first thing I want to do. So we start placing our assets. How do they look? So let's put it across the phone. So File, Build Settings. I want to go into Player Settings. Let's make sure that it says Lab 6B, right, and not from a previous lab. So I'm going to go to Other Settings again here. I've also made it so that the orientation settings for this thing are only in landscape, so no portrait. Now, if you're making a tower, like a ladder climbing kind of game, like Russ was suggesting, you know, it might be an interesting mechanic where when you switch your orientation, new ladders appear or something like that. But again, it can be very tricky in terms of coding. So I want to push this across now, but I want to make sure that I can see the Samsung device that is being mimicked by LD Player. Let's push it like build and run and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to put this inside of builds. I want to call this 6B and put it inside the builds folder. Of course, it's going in the wrong spot. It's not supposed to go in there. It's supposed to go into 2014, and it's supposed to go into, I got to watch that because it might go in the wrong spot and then things I upload won't work. 6B. And then what I want to do is make a new folder called builds and go in there. So a couple things that I've done here. So I'm just setting up the environment. This is the first bit, and you might think this is the easy bit, but actually people overlook this part. Does it even run on your phone? Like, does it look the same? These are things that are important to set up your platform or assets properly. Making a level can take a lot of time, and we're going to add to this level as we go. Every week we get together, we'll add more stuff, more capabilities for our player, and until we have kind of some pretty good gameplay, enemies that have basic AI, we'll do all that together. So by the end you have kind of a basis for how to add things to the game. Obviously it's not going to be a full game, but we'll be building something together the entire time. When I make my new labs, every lab will be based on the other one. So I'll give you a starter that comes from this lab, and then we'll go from there. So it's something that's very straightforward. If you wanted to continue from the previous week, you can do that too. Just make a copy of your project, make it brand new, keep the old one, make a new GitHub repo, and away you go. All right, so let's take a look and see what happens to LD Player. It's something weird's going to happen, which I noticed right off. It actually goes full screen on me in a second. You'll see what happens. It's pretty cool. Right? Look at that. It's massive, it's huge, and it's pretty cool. So that looks okay to me, right? That is pretty good. And one thing to do now is to kind of see what you're getting, right? For example, my safe area here is viewable over here, right? That's important to note. And I can see that my area here, so this isn't really taking into account my safe area at all. My recommendation to you is that the safe area is actually on this other side, right? So I'm going to just switch it so that the safe area is over here, and we're going to assume that there's no safe area on this side at all. Okay? Cool. So you should have this too by now. All right, great. That's LD Player. I think we're ready to put this up on GitHub for a start. So I'm going to save the project, save the scene, and shut down Unity. I'm going to pull up a command prompt and put it up on GitHub. So oh, that's too quick. What? What? Am I not in the right place? Oh, I call it lab. That's why. Okay. And then what I want to do is make a new repository online, which I'll do right now. Sorry, I'm just doing my GitHub. You're doing it. I'm sure you're doing yours at this point. Okay, grabbing these last 3 lines of code. And that should be good. And then I'll put this up and I'll say create a background. Now notice this is quite big. Like we're clocking right now 50%. We're at about 75 megs. So again, in my mind, I'm thinking it's probably about 150 megabytes for the project size because of all the assets. Oh, it's more, 170 megs. Okay, so there we go. So I pushed it up to GitHub. So that way it only pushes the assets that I want. It's also rejigged where all the assets are, so everything is up and running. And just to make sure, I'm going to put this link up on George Brown, our lesson here. So we'll say web link, week 9 GitHub link, just in case you need it. Okay, so you can go there and compare my code with your code. Okay, so you should be with me now in terms of starting. I'm going to add a new project. It's going to be called 6B. Select my project and go. So are you with me? Did you put it up on GitHub? Have you done what I did? I've got the background going. Are we good? Check mark if you're good. X, not good. So sorry, cat. And I'm recording it too, so it's okay, but I just didn't want you guys to waste your time as we go. All right, let's continue. So I'm just going to change the background just to turn it off for now so we can see what we're doing. I'm also going to shift the simulator in here for now, just so that I can see the scene larger and I can see where we're at in terms of what's happening. Okay, so that's the background. This is the grid, and here is a little bit of tiles. What I want to do now is I want to add the character, the player, right? So again, going back into Sunnyland, I want to go into the player. So sprites player, and there is the idle animation. I want you to pull that in. So grab the 4 frames of idle animation. I want you to change the pixels per unit right away to 16 because I know that's going to probably be the size. Click apply, and then take those 4 frames of animation and drag them in. It's going to ask me for where I want to put this. I want to put this inside of assets. I want to go to animations and a new folder. I want to call it platformer. And inside platformer, I want to make another folder called player. So I'm going to have player, enemy, a bunch of other stuff. There's player. And I want to call this the player idle clip. Player-idle-clip.anim. This will be my player. Let's rename it. It'll be called player. You can see he's right there hiding. I want to tag him as a player. This is important to do, right? So player, tag this player, save the scene, move him around. Let's move him to so that he's a little fox character, and move him kind of to the center of this platform over here. Player, and the animations folder under the platform folder, under the player folder, there are two little files now. And remember, let's remind you how this works. You should have already had animation from JOS. So again, this is the player controller, and this is the clip, the motion clip. So I want to modify this to say player animator controller. So again, I'm going to right click and rename, or just click once and then click again. Player animator controller. This is the player idle clip. If I double click on my player animation controller, I'm going to have something that looks like this, where I have the player idle clip as the entry point to my animation state machine. I'm going to change this so that up here on the right, when I click on the clip, it gives me this clip in the inspector where I'm going to change this to idle. So we know what it is, the player idle animation. Right now, the idle animation is playing at 100%. We may choose to change that later. For now, we should just play this and see what happens. So let's play it and see what I get. Hey, the fox guy, he's playing, and it looks like he's okay. He's probably around the right size for the interface, and he's playing. It might be a little fast. We can always slow this down. We can try it here in real time, so we can kind of go and see what that's like. Maybe that's about a little better. Maybe 0.8 might work nicely, so maybe we'll work with that. So notice when I changed it here in the inspector this time, it changed, right? So be careful when you change stuff here for animations. It changes permanently. All right, so that's one thing. And I want to give him a rigid body 2D. I want to give the environment some colliders, all that kind of stuff I want to put into place. How do I do that? First things first, I want to go to my tile map, and I want to add a new collider. So add a component. We're going to call this tile map collider 2D. Okay, that's all I need to do. Tile map collider 2D. And once I've done that, I want to add a collider and rigid body to my player. All right, so let's do that. So player, and I'm going to change I want to add a rigid body 2D. Here it is. And I also want to add a collider. My thought is I'm going to make it a capsule collider. All right, and why? Because when I go on the corners, I want to be able to fall, and I think it's a little bit more natural than using a box collider, because then he'll just like kind of hang almost right at the corner of this thing without falling. So Capsule Colliders is what it's going to be, Capsule Collider 2D. I want to edit it, but I can't see it here. I have to see it in the scene. So this is what the Capsule Collider 2D looks like by default. And what I want to do is I want to make it tighter on the player. So again, just make this tighter, and this one in here. And you're going to say, wait, it's going to fall over because there's kind of a point down here. Also, I don't want to make it to this part go below his feet. Again, you can really zoom in here to get a sense of how deep it goes. That's pretty good. But I want to make it this shape because this way he can kind of fall off the edge a little easier, right? Again, people have different opinions about how to do this kind of stuff. There's different techniques. This is how I like to do it. All right, so that's my little collider. Okay. And let's see how this works, right? So I'm going to run it, and let's see if it happens. He falls, yay. right? And what I can do, let's bring back that other view. So I'm going to go back to landscape view so I can see both at the same time. And what I want to do is I want to control this guy. So see what happens when he goes off to the edge. When does he fall? Oh, that's not what I want. I don't want him to fall over like that. That's cool, but not what I wanted. So we can go into Rigid Body 2D and change these constraints so that we freeze rotation on the Z-axis. So he doesn't fall over like that. Let's try that again. So again, he falls. Pull him over to the side, right? And let's see what happens when he falls on the edge, right? So he has to be like really right on the edge to fall, but he does fall eventually. We can make it sharper. We can use different different shapes for that as well, but that's not bad. All right, so that is my little guy, right? That's my little player. Okay, so let's save the game. What I want now is I want to be able to control him with a joystick. So I want to kind of do this all in one kind of thing before I save again. Again, I could do another git commit and so on, but I'm not going to do it just for time. So I'm going to go to my joystick pack here. Under the joystick pack, there is a prefab, and it's fixed joystick. I want to kind of install a canvas. So I want to go to here and right click. I want to go UI. I want to put in a new canvas. Here's my canvas. And I want to take my fixed joystick and put it inside the canvas item. Now this is where I need this because I can't see this here because remember we've got an abstracted canvas away from what we're seeing here. So what I want to do is let's just zoom out so we can see the joystick control. There it is. I want to move this. Remember we just talked about best practices. This is way too close to the edge. I want to bring this whole thing to the right. Maybe something like this. And I want to make this bigger. My thoughts are something like 1.5 times as large. And I'll bring it a little bit down, but again, you're going to see that that's probably too low. Especially when some iPhones are going to have a safe area that's down here, right? Remember that I'm probably not going to have him here. I'm probably going to have him in the middle of the screen most of the time. This little guy, right? So that's where the controller is going to be. I want to change the alpha transparency so it's not like 100% opaque. So I want to go here and change this to, let's say, 128, which changes the edges. And then inside the fixed joystick, the handle, just change the alpha transparency again to about 128. So now you can see that that's kind of, I can see through it. It's not as obtrusive. Again, I recommend you change this texture so it's more interesting. Right now it's pretty boring, but the idea is it should work. If I run it right now, just from a functionality perspective, it has basic functionality where it snaps back. Okay, but notice here how I can't take it all the way down. Not that I care to go down, but crouching would be a problem if I went below this, right? So just FYI, same thing with this and this. Careful, if I go beyond this, I'm gonna lose my joystick here. That's okay, right, kind of thing, but that's how it should work. All right, cool. So what I want to do now is I want to enable this thing. I already have a script called player controller. I want to make another script so that I don't clash with this one, so I keep the other project going. I'm going to call it player behavior. Let's make a new one. So create a new C# script. We'll call this player behavior. There it is. And I want to attach it to my player object. So again, I'm just going to minimize these and just drag my player behavior onto my object. There it is. I'm going to double click on it. I'm just going to bring up my Visual Studio. And in here, what I want to do is a couple things. I want to have access to my joystick. And the way to do that is I'm just going to call a new, this is built in because of the little extension pack we loaded. So it's going to be public. And it's going to be called joystick. And we're going to call it joystick. I'm doing it faster than my Visual Studio can update. That's okay. It's going to turn green in a second. And just for this, I'm just going to do it all in one, like I said. So I'm going to drag and drop from the canvas joystick, the fixed joystick, to the joystick that I've just made. So again, all I did was I said joystick, joystick, and I put a joystick, a fixed joystick in the canvas, which is from our joystick pack, and I'm dragging and dropping from the canvas to the player behavior script. Okay. Now, we're going to do what we normally do. We're going to say if, well, first of all, let's make a function, because of the single responsibility principle we learned about. We're going to make a void object call, or function called move. And this function move is going to be called on update. Move is going to look like this. If joystick dot horizontal is greater than some kind of joystick sensitivity, joystick, I don't have this yet, horizontal sensitivity. All right, if it's greater than that, let's put that in play. So public float joystick horizontal sensitivity. Okay, if it's greater than this, then that's like what I'm doing before, where I have a dead zone. It's greater than the dead zone. Then I want to move right. Else if, the same thing, but negative, less than negative joystick horizontal sensitivity, then I want to move left. Else, I'm not moving at all. Idle. Okay? Those are the three things I'm doing right now. So what I need is I need some kind of force. I want a horizontal force, and I also want a vertical force so I can jump later. So public float horizontal force and public float vertical force, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say the following. I'm going to say that I need to get the rigid body to do something for me. I don't have a reference to the rigid body. Let's make it now. We'll make it private. Okay. If it's private, I want to make it an underscore. Right? M underscore maybe. Just to make it so we know it's us. It's our thing, right? Rigid body 2D is equal to get component rigid body 2D. Pretty simple. I know I'm probably going to need the when I'm going to move, I'm going to do some animations and so on. I want to get the other things too in preparation. So one thing I want to do is get the renderer, Sprite Renderer. So private Sprite Renderer. And I'm also going to do the animator controller. Okay, and let's assign them. Oop. Are you with me? Line 28, I missed the who? The left-hand sign in the sign. I don't know where that is. Anyways, I think this is pretty good so far. All right, so that, I got horizontal force, vertical force, I got my rigid body, my sprite renderer, and my animator. Okay, cool. Here, let's do some work. So now, what I wanted to move right, I'm going to say that m underscore rigid body 2D dot add force. I'm going to add a new vector2 object. Actually, we'll just do a vector3 dot right multiplied by our, now what we want is horizontal force, right, multiplied by time dot delta time. Okay, that's going to move us to the right. I'm going to do the same thing to the left by just swapping this. Okay, so add force to the right, add force to the left. Okay, this should give us some movement. Let's go back to Unity and try this out. Line 28 again? Or line 38? Sorry, did I make a mistake? Line 38, else if... Yes. That is definitely a problem. Thank you. Alright, here, this one. Alright, so what we want to do is try this out, but the problem with it is the player doesn't have anything here. Sensitivity, I want to make it at 0.2. My thoughts are. Horizontal force, I'm going to make it so that it's like 500 for now. Vertical force, we're going to make it like 10,000. Remember, this is force in newtons equivalent, right? So it's not speed. It doesn't translate directly to speed. It's force. All right, and if I run it, and if everything goes well and I didn't mess up, then if I post to the right or the left, then I go right and left, right? And it'll stop by itself, right? Even enough to fall off. Are you with me? Check marks if you're with me, X if you need more time. I know, Russell, you're probably ahead of me, but... All right, I see some more people joining me here. X, Cat, still having a problem? Yes, absolutely, Michael. That's why I wanted to show you it. So I don't want you to burden yourself with doing this again. Russell's like, don't worry, I'm being lazy. Who cares? Thanks, Russell. All right, so this is good, but I want them to face different directions. For this, I need to use the Sprite Renderer. So let's go and back into the script here, and I'm going to say something that like this, right? So when I'm moving to the right, I'm going to say that m underscore Sprite Renderer dot flip x is equal to false. I don't want to flip, right? When I'm moving right, I'm facing right already, I'm good. But when I move to the left, I'm going to use m underscore Sprite Renderer dot flip x is equal to true. That's the only line you have to change. And that'll flip his animation from one side to the other. Let's try that again. You can always use scaling as well, and sometimes it's best, but let's see what happens. So, cool, and I move to the left. He moves to the left, right? And that's okay, right? Pretty good. That's one-liner. Okay, and now what I want to do is, this is good, but I want to add another animation. I want to add a run animation. All right, so let's do that next. So again, going back to the player, I'm going to go to his Sunnyland pack, going to Sprites player. I'm going to go to run. I'm going to select all the frames of animation. I'm going to change the pixels per unit to 16 and then press apply, which is going to change their scale. And then I'm going to kind of select all these and drag it into the hierarchy, which is going to take me back to the assets, animations, platformer, player folder, and change this to player run clip. Player-run-clip. And now that I've done that, I don't need the thing that's in the hierarchy. I can get rid of it. It was just there to generate my animation. I'm going to get rid of it, delete. Going back into the animations folder, into the platformer, into the player folder. I know I have lots of folders here, guys, and I know that Joss does it differently. I'm so sorry. But I like to be organized my way, so I don't need the other animator. There's two animators now. I get one from the first one and one from the second one. So I want the player animator controller, not this one. So let's get rid of this one. So now, though, that the other animator is there, this player animator controller, if I double click, I still only show one animation. I need to drag and drop from the run animation clip in there. I'm doing some visual programming. You guys should know how to do this. This should be review. If I click on the clip now on the right, I can rename it to run. And what I want to do is I want to right click on my idle animation clip and drag a line, make a transition that goes from here to run. And from run, right click, make a transition back to idle, because I can go from idle to run and then from run back to idle. In order for me to make this transition work, I need something to move it. Can we change the speed directly instead of using add force? You can, but then you're going to get weird. It won't be as smooth looking. But you can change the position if you want to. You can say transform.position is equal to velocity. If you want to use velocity and stuff like that. But I think that when you have a rigid body, you might as well use what's there, right? Since we're using physics anyway. All right, so yeah, so idle to run. So if I go idle to run, this is a transition. This transition, there needs to be a trigger that basically makes move from idle animation to the run animation state. So for that, I'm going to add a new parameter, and I usually use an integer parameter that I call animState. It starts off at 0, so the integer starts at 0. That's the idle state. And when I move to run, I want to change the condition here so that the anim state, when it equals to 1, switches to animation, to the run animation. Going back the other way, if I click the transition and I add a new condition, I can say that when the anim state is equal to 0, it goes back to idle. Now, I don't like a couple of things here. One thing I don't like is the transition from idle to run and from run to idle has exit time. Let's unclick that and unclick this. Has exit time means that you have to wait for the animation to finish before you start the new one. That's bad. It's not always bad. It's just bad in this case. Also, there's blending happening right here. I don't want this blending at all. What I want instead is no blending. So now there's a couple of things you can do. You can definitely set up the transition duration as well as the blending type and so on. But I'm going to do it by eye. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this kind of to the end like this and move this so that it shows 95% and 59%, and then I'm going to move this run part all the way to here. So it's very little transition. There's not much blending happening is what I'm doing. This is from idle to run. Again, from run to idle, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move this all the way to the edge. Move this so it's 95%. Idle all the way to that. And we're good to go. So all I've done is for each transition, I've reduced the blending parameter, taken off exit time, both ways. Both transitions have a trigger where with my animation state goes to 1, it goes to the run animation. When it goes to 0, it comes back to idle. I need to be able to trigger it now with code. A couple ways to do this. I'm going to do that the old-fashioned way. There's other ways, obviously, to do this. You can add events, triggers, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to just do it the easy way. So going back to my script, inside of here, I know I have a reference to my animator. I can just go m_animator dot set integer. The integer name is called anim state, and I'm going to push 1 to this state. So I'm going to say that my anim state, when I'm moving to the right, I'm going to change the anim state integer to 1. I'm going to assign 1 to it, or send a message to the anim state that now you've turned into 1. Do the same thing when I'm running to the left. And when I'm not running at all, it's going to go back to 0. And that is enough to give me my animation state changes. Are you with me? You should have done something like this with JOS. Yes? Same as JOS or different than JOS, but maybe similar? I don't know. Different than JOS. Yeah, well, I mean, everyone has a different way of doing it, but yes, you can. Just a moment. All right, so the transition looks like this. So here, I'm just make it bigger for you. So each of the transitions going this way, from idle to run, no exit time. This looks like it's 95%. You can see the run is way at the edge. Anim state equals to 1, and I made anim state as a parameter. And the same thing goes on the other way back. So no exit time, 95% on the run. On the way back, it comes, back to idle. And anim state equals to 0. Okay, so that is the challenge there. So that should be enough for you, Michael, yeah? All right, let's test this thing and see if it even does what I'm supposed to do. So now, if I run to the right, I can see that it moves. Go to the left, it moves. Right, moves. And I've got my little animation. Yeah? One more thing. I want to make myself jump. I need a jump animation. So let's get that done too. So again, going back into player, I'm going into jump. I've got 2 frames of jump animation, right, that are here. I'm going to change the pixels per unit to 16. Apply. Drag and drop it into the scene. Drag and drop it into this. I don't know what happened there. It's showing me the animation, but that's not what I wanted. Drag and drop it into the scene. And go back into assets, into animations, into platformer player, and change this to player-jump clip, which creates my jump clip. And if I go to my animations player, I can get rid of the jump clip controller. I don't need this, but I do need this. And what I want is to drag and drop the jump clip inside there now. So now I have 3 animations. I have run. Let's just go into another thing altogether where I can see. I'm going to go into a different layout so I can see more stuff. So I'm going to go to tall. And I want to go and see the animator controller. I put the right one in there? Yeah. So this is what it looks like. So player jump obviously needs to be renamed to jump. Let's move these around. Again, I'm just reorganizing. What I want to make is I want to be able to go from run to jump, from jump to idle, right? I want to be able to do those things. So I have to make 4 more transitions. So run to jump, jump to run, jump to idle, idle to jump. Because you can do any of those things, right? It makes sense. So again, let's go through the same things, right? When I go from run to jump, I don't want exit time. I don't want exit time on the way back. I don't want exit time anywhere. So let's get rid of all those. So one thing at a time. I just try and deal with all that stuff. From run to jump, I want to say that my anim state has to be 2. Not greater than 2. 2. From jump back to a run, my anim state has got to be equal to 1. Because 1 means run. From idle to jump, my anim state has got to be equal to 2. Because 2 means jump. And from jump to idle, my anim state is going to be equal to 0. Because 0 means idle. Let's try and make sure that those are correct. Jump to idle, 0. Idle to jump, 2. Run to jump, 2. Jump to run, 1. All looks okay. Now let's adjust the blending rates. right? So this is where I want to adjust this bar. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing on the way back. I know this seems trivial to some, but I find that it's very useful, because what ends up happening is you have additional frames that come from nowhere, and you're like, wait, where do those frames come from? And then you look at them and you go, wait, oh yeah, this is why. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to pull this. Sorry. Yeah. Let's make sure that's correct as well. Sorry, I want to make it proportional. That's why I'm mucking around with it. All right, same thing goes here. So to there. Again, some people don't mind with this kind of thing. I do. So, but whatever. There we go. No blending. All right, save. So I've got my blending. I've got my number. I need to be able to go to a 2 in order for me to do my stuff. All right, let's go. So back to this. That's not my code. Back to this. That's my code. Yes, I want to add another thing. I'm going to say that else if joystick.vertical is greater than joystick vertical sensitivity. Oh, damn it. Joystick vertical. Why isn't it coming up? Vertical.
Because you didn't make it yet.
I did, I swear. I didn't do it. I thought about it. And when I think about it, it's just made, okay? Joystick vertical sensitivity. All right, joystick, thank you for that. Sensitivity, I spelled it all right too, yay. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this. It's going to jump, right? So this is gonna be a jump move. I'm gonna add, I don't care about flipping. I'm not gonna flip anything. Whatever it was is where I'm gonna stay. What I need is this animator to go to 2 when I'm jumping only. This will be up, and this will be vertical force, not horizontal force. So that is the jump. But however, I have a problem, and my problem is that the assumption is that I'm grounded, and I'm not. If I jump, then I'll stay jumping, and I can jump, double jump, triple jump, or whatever. I don't want that. In my case, I want to make it so that only when I'm grounded that I can jump. That means if I'm touching anything. So I can do a wall jump, but let's take a look at this. So I'm going to say void. I'll make it private too. On collision, enter 2D, if I can spell collision properly. I'm going to use colliders for this. All right. Now, there's other ways you can do it with ray casting and a bunch of other stuff, but for now, I'm just going to do collision 2D other. I'm going to say that we're going to have another variable that I'm going to call, make it public for now, Boolean, which is grounded. So I'll say is grounded is equal to true on collision entity. And then private void avoid on collision. Wow. No code hitting. Exit 2D. Collision 2D other is grounded is equal to false. All right. So
that if you're like kind of sliding down a wall, you can just keep jumping because you'll be colliding with the wall.
yeah, but that's what I want, right? So Russell sees a problem with this. Let's see what happens. You only made vertical force. Wait, Russell, wait. You're smarter than I am. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to check to see if I'm grounded before I do any of this. So I want to say, okay, if is grounded, then I can move, but I can't move if I'm not grounded. Now this can change. You can change these states a little bit and make more complex branching than me, but I want to make it so that I won't move until if I'm grounded. I can't move or jump. Okay. Yes, there's a problem with this, and we'll talk about it in a sec. The problem is, what happens if I'm on the corner? Then I'm going to get double the force. I like the enum state machines too. They're really cool. All right, let's go back to this. So back to this, I'm going to go back to my, from tall, I'm going to go back to my landscape layout. And I have some, sorry, my landscape layout does my safe area in the wrong spot. I have some pretty cool stuff. I want to get rid of this player jump because that's an extra little artifact that I have in there. And let's save the scene. Let's save the project so we have no wasted time, and run it and see what happens. So can I jump? Cool. Can I jump? Can I jump? All right. I mean, it's not the best animation, but it works. It's a little finicky, and I'm not happy with it. Oh, see, it's a little bit finicky for me. Again, it's not perfect, but it allows you to do everything with one stick. Imagine if you're playing this with your thumb. But see how when I'm clicking on it, it makes it so I can jump. 10,000 force is okay, but if I keep clicking on it, this is what happens. Look, it'll keep on doing this. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Now, if this is what you want, great. But if it's not what you want, right? And what happens is exactly what I was expecting, is when you're wall jumping, because you're already colliding, right? You're going to get a crazy jump happening. Okay? Like off screen. The clip is wrong for the
it's the asset. There's no actual. I've actually used this asset pack before. There's no actual jump animation. The two images you're using for the jump animation are the going up and going down. That's why it looks like he's freaking out in midair, because he's not actually supposed to be animated when he jumps.
Well, I'm making him animated. The clip is wrong. Who cares? But the point is that I'm showing you the transition between animation. But thank you for that. But anyways, the problem that I'm having right now is when I'm hitting this, I've got too much force. If I change the force, right now the joystick vertical sensitivity is set also to 0. Let's make it so that it's higher, 0.1. All right. Let's see if that makes a difference, because that's how I was jumping so crazy, right? All right. So now it's a little better. Let's try that again. And we're going to put it on the control on the device too, right? So notice that. So this is pretty good, right? If I jump, I can do it, but it's just, from a thumb clip perspective, it's pretty weird. My horizontal force also is kind of weird, but my vertical sensitivity might be okay. It's 0.1 and 0.2. If you want to do 0.1 and 0.1, you can try those kind of things. I think it's too sensitive at 0.1 myself. But yeah, it's a little hard, to be honest with you. And we may want to think about making a button instead. Okay, let's fix the camera now, and then we'll be done for him. Because the biggest problem right now is there's like, I got no camera follow. It doesn't look really great. Let's save the scene. And again, I know I'm doing a lot, but I want to save time. That's why I'm doing it this way. So really, we've got the player and there's motion. Okay, there's still some other animations that are here. For example, there are climb, crouch, hurt. You know, we can include these as well. And obviously you want to use climb for any kind of climbing activity. If you want to give climbing, crouching makes sense. You know, if you want to move down. One thing to note is what happens when I move to the, when the player is active. So remember, here's the player. And I want to show you his Capsule Collider, all right? Because this is important. So here's his Capsule Collider. Let's take a look. And now I'm going to move him. Okay, so one thing to note is when I move to the right or left, his Capsule Collider is good. Sometimes when you use another kind of collider shape, I find that he sticks out a little bit too much. This way, he's not sticking out all that much, and we're pretty good. But I still think that it's too much force. And, you know, as an example, I've got no air control, which is okay, because the way I did it. But I find that the control that I'm getting from this thing itself is not that great. Alright, so what I want is a camera to help me with, so I can see the player. And there are some built-in scripts that I've given you to help out. So again, you're free to use the scripts that I've put in here for yourself for this one, because platformers are tricky. So there is, under the standard assets, under cameras, there's a script that I want to use called Autocam. Now there's issues with this. What I can do is I can attach it to my camera, and immediately it'll auto target the player. But there's a proviso to this, right? If I run it, it'll work for like 1 second, and then you won't see the player anymore. Why? Because the camera actually zooms right into the player, like his face, which is not good. So I want to make another little script called PlayerCam. So I'll make a new C# script called PlayerCam. This is a hack. My PlayerCam script that I'm going to run is going to do one thing: keep me at bay. Which is kind of cheesy, but it is what it is. We're going to use something else later. Think about this as a placeholder. I want to say that transform.position is equal to a new vector3 object, which transform.position.x and transform.position.y, and -10 every single moment for the z, which is going to keep me at bay. Again, takes up a little bit of cycles, but it's not terrible. And then I'm going to attach it to the player camera. So I'm going to say that player cam, I'm going to attach this thing to the player camera, so it's going to just keep it at bay. Sure. So all I did was I made a player cam that literally holds off. I pass in the same values for X and Y, so it doesn't touch the X and Y values, but it keeps the camera at -10 distance from the player, so it keeps the camera back. Otherwise, what's going to happen is because the player camera in reality is a 3D camera, it's going to try and reduce the distance on the Z-axis as well, so it's right on top of the player, right? Now, there's another way to do this. I've got to tell you, which is to set up a standoff point for the player. So it's not, the camera's not directly on the player, but it's actually on another object. And that object is actually offset from the player -10. So that the camera's just on that object as opposed to the player itself. But this is perfectly fine too. So now what we get is when we run it, we shouldn't have that problem anymore. We should be able to do pretty good follow script, and not bad in terms of the way it works. It looks like the player is centered now, so this is unobtrusive, much better than it was before. I'm still not happy with the whole jumping mechanic, right? Because it's not quite good enough, right? And the last thing I want to do is put in a death plane so it can respawn, so I can keep playing. All right, so let's save this and put this up on GitHub. And you should have everything that you need to get going with the player camera. Again, not using Cinemachine yet. With the animations, with just bare minimum stuff that we want to use. Background, which we can turn on, right? So that it would look a little bit like this, right? All right. So let us turn that background back off. Let's save it. I'm going to save the project, exit from Unity, go to my code, git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say added player. Because that's what we did. This whole thing was adding the player. So that should have everything that you need online. Let's get back to it, and we'll do a couple last things. Tweaks. All right, so I want a death plane. Again, there's a couple of ways to do this, the death plane thing. But first, what I want to do is let's test it on the device. So build and run, please. I want to build and run fairly often, and because I want to be able to test to see that everything is okay from a build perspective. One thing is to run this thing on your editor, and the other thing is to run it in the simulator, and another thing yet again is to run it on the phone, right? You're always going to get the most accurate results obviously on a phone, but not everyone has an Android phone or this one. So this is okay to run in the simulator. All right, let's see how this is going to look. All right, starting off, and cool, right? And we can see that now we got a pretty good thing happening. I'm not unhappy with it, to be honest with you. I'm not sure I like the jumping though. Like, especially when it comes to both ways, because you can only do one, right? And it's going to fall forever. So we got to fix this problem, because you should be able to run and jump. I can only do one because I do an else if as opposed to if statement or switch case. All right. So so that would be a problem. There's some logic I can fix, but for now, right, we have pretty good response. I think there's still some things we need to fix from a gameplay perspective. But what I want to do now is make a death plane so that I can come back alive. So there's a couple things to do here to make the death plane. What I like to do is take advantage of the tile map, right? So I'm going to go and go back into the grid, go into the tile map. Here it is. And let's take a look at my tile map. So if I go to 2D tile palette, here it is. Again, you can use whatever you want. I like to use something that has no meaning, like something like this. And what I want to do is way at the bottom here, just kind of put in this death plane. Now, how the heck are you going to do it this way? Would this even work? Is the question, because this is something new, right? I've added in some tiles, and these tiles themselves, as an example, they're going to collide with everything else. How do I know it's going to get here, right? Well, the great thing is you can put in another collider wherever you want, right? The other thing to do is to put an empty sprite in here if you want, right? But what I really need is just an empty collider. What I can do, the great thing about these, is I can color them or tint them any color that I want, right? So if I go back into the sprite sheet, I could do that. So this is what I'd like to do, but there's going to be issues doing this thing. One thing is that the tile map itself is contiguous, right? So it's one. I can't literally go and do something with a specific tile necessarily, right? Notice that the grid is its own thing, right? And the tile map is another object of its own, right? It's not like I have complete control of every tile, right? So that is an issue. If I want to make complete control of every tile, I need another tile map. So let's do that. Let's undo. And what I want to do is I want to add another tile map. So add tile map. The tile map I'm going to put down is the depth plane. Okay. The depth plane is also going to be using the same tile set. So what I want to do, depending on what I click on, this or this, I can use a different kind of collider. I don't have to necessarily put on the collider that I used before, right? And I can also tag it with different things. So right now, this tile map has no tag. This tile map can have a tag. I can make a new tag for this one. We'll just call this tag depth plane. Okay, and then use it. That's this thing here. And what I want to do is add them in. So again, go back to Window, 2D, Tile Palette. And I'm using the same tile palette. Notice this tile map. I have to specify depth plane. So when I specify depth plane, now I'm drawing on the depth plane, not on the tile map. It's very important. Otherwise, we'll draw the same tile set somewhere else. Okay, so again, notice that there is paint with active brush. There's also paint a filled box with active brush. I can pick or mark key, select a new brush. I can delete a brush, and I can flood fill with an active brush. We don't want to do any of these things. I definitely want to choose this again, and I want to put this at the bottom. So I want to kind of do one of these. Now there's no collider yet. All right, so we can make it so it's pretty large. There we go. All right, so anytime I fall off the depth plane, it's going to do this thing. And I could also go one further and create another tile palette where I can take the same stuff and modify the color or whatever I want. But for now, let's just leave it alone. So this is the tile map renderer. That's one thing it has. And we have a material that's Sprite's default, right? The Sprite's default material. I can put whatever material I want in there. I can also change the depth plane's color tint to something else. Let's say I want to make it red. I can do that. So this is, all the tiles will be red now for this whole thing. Now let's add a tile map. By the way, there's different things. The other one you can add is a Composite Collider 2D, right? So there's a tile map collider and a Composite Collider, right? So a Composite Collider 2D adds a rigid body, and it adds a Composite Collider 2D, and basically what it does is it adds a collider for everything, right? So to show you what this does, if I was to run this thing, it falls forever, right? Because it's got a rigid body on top of it, okay? But the Composite Collider 2D could be a trigger if I want. That's an option. And I can also change the rigid body 2D properties to constrain its position. All right, so that's an option. Let's get rid of that. So it's an option. I'm looking at options, things that I could do. How about the tile map collider? So if I go to the tile map collider, 2D, I can also make that a trigger. So this is a trigger, right? And it'll work just the same. But now what I need on my character is a trigger collider, right? So let's do that next. So if I was to go to my character, so there's two colliders. There's a collider, Capsule Collider 2D. Now I'm going to make another one. And let's make a regular box collider. The cheapest one we can. All right. The box collider is going to be a trigger. Okay. It's got a rigid body, so I'm good to go. And now all I need is on trigger enter 2D for it to work. Okay, so that's how it'll collide with this death plane. We can also, for the death plane itself, right? Right now the tile map is being rendered because of this. I can always turn it off. This is just for the death plane. So if I don't want to show it, for now we're just going to keep it on for debugging purposes, but for later on we're going to turn it off. Okay. All right, let's go back to the player. Let's go back to player behavior. Where is player behavior? Did I put it in the wrong spot?
No, you're in the wrong folder. You're still in the camera folder.
I'm happy. Because I was like hurting. I was going, wait, no. Got too many things going on, Russell. So what I want is on trigger enter 2D. So private void on trigger enter 2D with a collider 2D other. For now, I don't care, any trigger for now is what I want. I'm not going to check for anything. All I want to do is respawn. Right? So now I don't have a respawn point, but I'm going to create one. And it's going to be something that's going to be in the game scene. So let's make it so where the player is right now. I'm going to put an empty object, game object. So we'll make an empty. We'll call this a spawn point. Okay. And let's make sure that it is in the right spot. And it is a 0 because this is where the player is. The player is at 0, so is this thing, right? Otherwise, we won't be able to see the player anymore, right? Again, you can put it wherever you like. I just want to put it right here. You can also add a gizmo to it. I'm not going to do that. So spawn point is a transform. All it is a position. So it's a non-drawable object. Okay? I need to let player behavior know about it. So let's make a spawn point. So we'll call it transform spawn point. And again, this is one way of doing it. There's many other ways. What I want is for my spawn point, when I hit the death plane, I want to spawn right back in here. All right, so that's kind of the simple behavior that I want. Let's code it now in my player behavior. So I'm going to say that my transform dot position is equal to my spawn point dot position, and that should be it. So if I collide with anything, any trigger right now, it'll do it. Okay, it's not what I want eventually. I want to obviously name it just like this. I don't want to just say hit collide with anything. I want to collide with a specific thing. You know, as an example, remember you can partition your tile map so that the tiles that are vertical as opposed to the ones that are horizontal are not the ones you can collide with to be grounded. If you don't want wall jumping, you don't have to have it, right? You can make all the tiles that are going up and down part of a different tile map altogether. Order in layers 1, I don't think you require it. Let's see how this works, if it even works. All right, and I just want to fall. So run it, and we should kind of see this. That was weird. What did it collide with?
Our trigger is colliding with the tile map below it. It's not like choosing which tile map to collide with. It's just
God damn it.
activating on it anyway.
We're not going to have that happen. So we're going to say if other.gameObject.name is, or compare tag, sorry, compare tag with death plane, then only then do we want to do it. I didn't want to do this, but I guess it makes sense. All right, let's try that. And I'll come back and show you what I just did. In a second, I just want to test to make sure that that's good enough. Yes, cool. All right, so all I did was I said other, the thing I'm colliding with, game object that this is connected to, right? Compare tag. It's a better way than just saying if the name is equal to. It's better to do it this way, compare tag. It's more accurate. So if other game object compare tag is the death plane, then only then do you spawn point, change position back to the spawn point.
Is the main purpose of the death plane having a trigger as well on it?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times what I find is I get better response when I have triggers on both sides. That's why. Not because of anything else. Sometimes I get flaky behavior when I don't do it that way, Michael. It should
just apply the respawn logic to the death plane, and then you don't need the trigger on the player. The player's collider will hit the trigger and activate it.
Yeah.
So you're not just like loading everything on the player.
See? That kind of works. There is a bit of a camera movement thing, but it's okay. I'm fine with that. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I don't need what I don't need now is to see the death plane anymore. So I can go to the grid, I can go to the death plane, and I can go to my tile map renderer and turn it off. And now I won't see the death plane when I land. Right? So it's pretty good now. Now let's pass it over to the thing, our file, save, file, save project, file, build and run, and let's see how that works. And that's where I want to stay today. I think it's a good spot. And then there's things we can add to this. We can make the gameplay better. We can make it so that we can add a button as opposed to just like the stick. Because maybe we want to do a run and jump at the same time with both hands. It's going to be tricky for me to do it without having an actual device, but gameplay might be a lot better, smoother. Left and right only for the stick. I don't care about up and down, so I don't care how inaccurate I am with that, because I find the sticks are kind of inaccurate when it comes to moving up and down. The sensitivity is something I got to play with a lot to make it happen. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so here I am, and death plane. Yeah, jumping. Oh, died. See, it's so hard. Like with this, see, because I'm doing an if else, it's I can do one or the other. See that? But I can't do both, right? Oh, and then you get one of those happening too, where it's beyond normal. That's probably going to hit the death plane. Yep. So there's some issues for sure, right? But at least we have animation. We have our jump animation, our run animation, our idle animation. We have the death plane. We have our controller working. It doesn't work great, but it works, right? I'm just not happy with the jump. That's what I'm not happy with. Otherwise, the controller functions okay. I'm not sure if it's timed properly or if I'd want to put a more or less friction on the ground. To be honest, I'm not sure if that what I want from there. or if the death plane is far enough down, right? It's going to go straight up and down.
Make a second boolean and have it like is jumping. So when we activate the jump, we'll set it to true, and only when we exit the collision part, we set it to false.
Yeah, I think there's lots of optimizations just like that, right? And other things too. My problem with this is not the necessarily the logic, but the control. The control is not great, right? I mean, I'm just being honest. I think that one of the biggest challenges I always have is whenever I use this on-screen control thing is how sensitive it is, how it works. Does jumping work at the same time? But going back to what you said, let's modify that. So if I was going to go to the script for player behavior, so look to see what we have, right? We say that, okay, only if you're grounded can you do any of these. And we're going to say that you can only jump, either move or jump, not jump and move, right? So that's kind of a issue, right? So it should be an if, and it should be on its own. It should have nothing to do with this else, right? My challenge with that is that if I don't put it in this line, then when it comes to going back to idle, right? Well, it's going to be where do I put this, right? Because just from this logic that we have here, right? So, and also if is grounded, the way we're doing it right now is very rudimentary. Right now I'm saying that if I'm colliding with anything, right, then I can jump, right? And like I said before, we can split that off. So
when we set is grounded to true, can we just make the anim state to 0 idle there?
Yeah, sure.
And then we can uncouple the
we can do this. We can take this away, right? If are you talking about which anim state? The idle or the jump?
No. So we leave that one there on the else, but then we can take out the jump, because then when we come back and land, or when we're landed, we're in grounded, we're just set to true, and then
check here. You mean?
Constant, I know.
That means you're always.
So just have a second one there.
So
I don't know if it will work though.
You mean check if your vertical sensitivity is here only when you're colliding? You check. I mean, yeah, you could say basically that, but then again, you could do this whole thing inside there, right? On collision enter, then do this. Don't even do it. Is grounded. Check. Right. So move. You can move. Check to see if you're moving. If you're colliding, right? Check the move. You know. So only if you're colliding do you move, and then you can decouple it from the update function completely, right? Like call this in here, right? But don't call it in here. Only on collision exit, then you can't do it, right? Or not even, you don't even have to have this one anymore. You just have to have this one. All right, so the only time it's checking is if I'm colliding. There's a danger here though. There's a real danger here. It can be checked twice. If I collide with the same thing twice, same kind of thing, right? So, I was thinking about if we decoupled this one, right? So if I said, okay, so I need to be grounded, and here's an if-else chain, right? But what about if this is alone, like this kind of thing, right? So that is also okay. But the problem with this is that if this is going to resolve and this is going to resolve at the same time. So I may not get any kind of animation state happening, because this is always going to be true. If this isn't true, then this is going to be true, right? So I got to say, like, the else statement has to be, well, and else is not this, right? Then only then do you do this idle state. Otherwise, if it's this, if I'm jumping, like you said, I have to state that I'm jumping or not. And if I'm jumping, then don't do idle. Right? So I'd have to have another Boolean.
I just don't like how you're using random state for all the parameters, using the one parameter.
We will talk about it after.
I want to talk about it now.
No. Hold on a second. Only because we're gonna eat time, and then you and I can have a conversation about it after. And then if you convince me, I'll change everything. How about that? So if joystick vertical then we can say that is jumping is true. Otherwise, if anything is like this, right? If it's not this, then if jumping is false, which is kind of terrible. But let's just put it in. This is what you were suggesting, something like this, Michael, right? And then else, we're going to say else if is jumping, if not is jumping, right? Then do this. If it's not jumping and it's not these, then do this, right? I'm not sure that that's going to make a great effect, but let's see what happens with this convoluted logic. I don't think it's great. I think we have to think about another movement system. So again, but the jumping is better? Maybe too good? Yeah, it's more playable, that's for sure. Because at least now I can do it. It's just too sensitive. So I have to reduce the sensitivity again. But it's better, Michael. So let's make the vertical sensitivity to 0.2. And it might be too much, maybe 0.15. Again, it's just the dead zone that I'm defining, right? Like on the joystick. Yeah, it's not bad. It plays okay. I don't like the animation, like Russell said. But, you know, it just goes up and down, right? So, yeah, it does work. I mean, it works like it should. It's just that the wall jumping thing is a little bit annoying. But again, what you could do is you can make these tiles here and these tiles here, the ones on the sides, right? You can make them part of another collider, right? So these ones here, I'm saying. So these ones could be part of another tile map, right? And you could say, well, if it's these tiles, but not these ones, then you're not grounded if you want to. Or you can reduce it. If you're hitting these things, you can reduce the, maybe you bounce back. You can also do that too. So if you hit them, you bounce. One last thing. One thing we've been working with is a fixed amount of physics restitution, which is your bounce, your bouncy. So your tile map has a physics material. That's what it's called, physics material. And what you can do with it is you can add in a for the physics material. You can add in a different kind of material together. Let's go there and add it in. So if I go to, I don't have a materials section. Let's add one in. So I'm going to say create new folder. We'll call it materials. And under materials, we'll add a new physics material. I'm not sure if you guys have done this before. I'm just, again, doing it with you. So we'll say this is like the ground material. And what you see is friction at 0.4, right? And bounciness, which is 0. So what I could do is I could introduce bounciness, let's say, of 0.2, right? And I can increase my friction to 0.6, right? And then I can apply it to my tile map. So in my tile map, I can drag and drop to produce a force, a friction and bounciness for each of the tiles. Now this is dangerous again, because what you're going to get sometimes is too much bounce, right? So not too great, but what you can get is it stops on a dime now. It doesn't go as far, right? I kind of needed that, to be honest with you, because I was sliding too much, right? So I think that's better. That's still too much, in my opinion. But be careful, because now what's going to happen is then you're going to get to the point where you're going to be slowed down by, the thing that it won't allow you to do it. It won't allow you to move. So you don't want it slowed down too much. And if bounciness isn't enough for you, be careful about the bounciness. That means we can reduce our force and let me bounce. I'm a bouncy character as opposed to a forcey character. Not sure if I like that, but let's put the bounce to like 0.6 to show you the difference. And again, I'm not sure if you guys have done these tests, but hey, what the heck? We're here to try stuff out. Okay, so take a look at that. Boom, boom, boom. Right, see that?
I have a little fix for the jumping.
Talk to me.
Alright, so when we're doing our joystick in the player behavior,
yep.
When we check if he's grounded, we can also check if he's not jumping.
Okay,
Do that if check.
If is grounded and not jumping.
No, so the joystick vertical. Oh, you had it. Okay, so the joystick vertical there, you can just add another if statement in there.
Mm-hmm. Inside?
Yeah.
Saying what?
Or is not jumping.
And is not jumping. So that's so you're saying that. So you're saying and is not jumping.
Sensitivity and jumping.
Is not is jumping. Is what you're saying, right? And you're saying that would be better because if it's not already jumping.
Activate it once.
Yeah.
But then we have to remove the times by delta time there.
Oh, because why?
Because it's only triggering it once, and it's not like spamming it multiple times as we're holding it. So it's sort of like being it more like an impulse instead of a.
But if you do that, the problem with this
is to lower the force
that can't be 10,000 anymore.
I found that 200.
250,
I think.
Okay, let's try that.
Pretty good.
I'm willing to try those things. I'll even try what Russ tells me to do too. Whoa, that is still pretty crazy.
I was thinking it was like rewrite half the code.
Don't do that.
It worked a lot better.
Well, I remember my system is different than yours. Once you take away delta time, then what happens is that it's system dependent now. How many times my cycles fire compared to yours? Right. So.
But it should only fire once.
Well.
As long as you're not colliding.
Yeah, I mean, it's not terrible. It's just, like I said, I'm not sure if this is a fix for me. Not sure. And if I was to put back time times delta time, it's going to be too slow, right? Because it's not going to work. Because if I go back to 10,000, just for a second. You're going to see it much slower, right? It won't be spamming, that's for sure, but my concern is not that. My concern is, see, it just needs to be at higher values. But the good thing about this, so I'm just going to test it in the thing here. Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you did. Anyways, there's some things we can do from a playability perspective to test this out and improve things for sure. I personally think that a couple things need to change. I think the control for jumping should be separate. That's my personal thing. I don't think it works great, right? I'm not sure if you guys agree, but I think it should be somewhere else, a separate control to do that. It's difficult to do with a mouse. Okay, I'm just being honest. Like, that is having both mouse control and control of where I'm going, and I have to stop touching this and go just do something else. That's gonna be a challenge. Like, to actually play it without using a phone. And unless you guys think this is great, I personally don't, right? But then in reality, with maybe on the actual device, it might feel a lot better. So I'll see if I can get an Android phone that I could use for the next time. Anyways, I think we should stop now. We're sitting at 2:50, and I want to talk about a couple things more before we depart. I also I want to speak with Alexander when she has a chance too. So let's go with this. So let's save this. I'm going to save this to Save the project. And I think this is a great start anyway. I think there's lots of stuff you can do to optimize your code. Remember, my view is make it work, right? Once you got it working, you can modify it. Don't try and be perfect in your coding at the beginning. Then afterwards, you can go and hone. For example, I could do ray casting. I could do a bunch of stuff here that might work better, right? So those are things we can change later. Let's say added what did we do? We added the camera and we added materials. That's all we really did. Added physics material. Okay. So you should have everything that I have at this point. Now, for your lab, please remember to take a screenshot of the stuff that you're doing here with me. So that way you can show me your simulators, see that it's working for you, and then you're good to go. Just final thoughts for next week. For next week, again, we're sitting at platforms and player movement. Notice that we did some of that today. We're going to do more of that next week. So we're going to focus a whole week on that. So less design stuff and more around optimizing player movement, because without player movement, we don't really have a great platformer. I'm also going to build out the level a lot more and kind of do a little bit of a design in terms of what we're going to do. So all next week, we're going to just be doing motion. That's it. Okay. Questions around the stuff we did today? Anyone have a question or comment or whatever? Russ, so you're talking about enums. Are you going to stick around for that, or are you going to take off?
Well, we have a class right after this, so I'd have to talk to you later about that.
God damn it. All right, sorry.
all our classes this semester are back-to-back. It's really frustrating.
I know, I'm so sorry. All right, well then, guys, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'll see you guys next week.
Was the screenshot the labs a new requirement? Because I don't